Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my
Hi.
gosh, it's working. Oh, the music,
Woo.
that low dark wave synth has finally given way to our melodious and beautiful voices.
At
Hello,
least
I
they're
am
melodious and
Molly. I
beautiful,
am
right?
Molly Hits Different. I am one of your GMs here on the Table, a Transverse Network, and I am being joined by the wonderful creatress Zemself,
Zercel.
Zerself, Fiona Shade Stories. Hello,
Hi.
Fiona. Can you introduce yourself, your name, your
Yeah.
pronouns, all that stuff?
Hi, folks. So I am Fiona. I use Zer pronouns, which are on the screen. So it's like Z is over there. That belongs to Zer. This is my buddy Pretzel. Pretzel also uses Zer pronouns. So for example, Z is Pretzel. This is Zer friend Marble. Um, babysitting Marble is a responsibility of Zer's. So these are Zer. I am a non-binary, obviously, creator. I'm a professional freelancer for editing and sensitivity reading for game design content. My biggest contributions to like big projects have been for like, Kinks and Cantrips. Was a pretty big thing that came out, and then I've also been publishing my own RPGs, including the Adventure College Student Handbook, which I kickstarted last year. And then I figured out it was going to take a heck of a lot of time to learn how to do book formatting and publishing and printing effectively. And geez, that took forever. So I'm currently doing another Kickstarter, which is digital fulfillment only, and is a much thicker tome. It's going to be like the Adventure College
Oh, we
student.
have props. Everybody. We have so many props. We have the dungeon, so we have the dice sword in the background. We Fiona has come with all of Zer's props.
I
Like,
have all my
be
props.
real.
So this was my first book. And as you can see, or in like many D&D books, it uses like a 2-column layout. And it's one of those things which is great for keeping a page count down for print cost, which is horrible for indie creators, but it's not super accessible. And so I'm excited to be doing a project that's going to be all size 14 or higher fonts, sans serif fonts, and single column layout. So it's going to try to be more visually accessible. And I'm really excited because we can also fulfill it 2 weeks after the Kickstarter ends because it's digital. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. And for me, I've always loved creating content with a queer and trans focus, and that's kind of at the heart of this one. So I'm really happy to be talking with other queer and trans creators. So thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. There were a couple phrases that really stuck out to me there. Obviously non-binary, which I love because that's just like it both means something and means nothing, and I adore that. And then also, I don't get a lot of font talk. You know,
Mm,
as like a DM most of my life, most of the times people see me on here, I'm like doing like goofy voices or whatever it might be. And so like font talk is a really big difference for me.
yeah.
But so cool to have you on. Again, we're here. We're doing an interview show. So let's interview some things. Let's view Interly. Um, what does it mean to be trans?
Are
To
you asking
you?
me that question?
Yeah, I'm just gonna let's start with a fastball.
All right. What does it mean to be trans? I think for me, my understanding of the word trans basically means that you feel like your identity is incongruent with how you're being treated for a perception of your physical body, specifically related to gender and sex, one or both. And for me, I think there's a difference between like, there's this obviously like drag to trans pipeline where I've known many people who've enjoyed experimenting with drag and it gives them gender euphoria. And they're like, ooh, maybe my identity is a little weird. But a lot of people just enjoy, experimenting with different clothes, wearing different things, but their identity doesn't actually shift. And for me, I was raised, not like raised, but I guess when I started realizing I was trans in high school and reaching out to community, it was all sort of like being non-binary was a term which for me like falls under the umbrella of being trans. But I'm now learning that's not the case, and for some people who identify as non-binary but not trans. But for me, it was always like under the umbrella of my gender isn't accurate to what I was assigned at birth and what people have been referring to me as. And so yeah, I think for me, it's can be a sort of a rejection of labels as much as a stepping into labels as well.
So speaking of stepping into things, tell me about the first time you stepped into a tabletop gaming situation. What was that like? What did you grow up on, or are you a recent convert?
I am not a recent convert, although I was at a convention this weekend and people were talking about having decades more gaming experience than I've been alive. I'm 26, so I started playing like 14 years ago with fourth edition D&D. My an older sibling who
40
uh,
stands in the chat. Please, 40 stands in the
already
chat.
stands in the
Like
chat, y'all.
it's highly maligned, but actually,
Well, like,
anyways.
yeah, so 4E had its pros and cons compared to 5E. Overall, I like 5E better, but does that mean I think 4E did everything worse? Absolutely not. Like, there's totally sorry, I'm trying to pull up your Twitch in the background. So regardless, I was lucky enough to start playing with a sibling who is also a professional like game designer as my GM. But as that sibling got older and moved away, I was unable to. Oh, somebody younger than me in the chat. I was. Yeah, as they moved away, I became kind of the perma GM. I started like play testing their games with my friends. I started making my own games. And, in middle school, I was trying to wrangle a bunch of boys together mostly to play Dungeons and Dragons. And like, there were all these funny moments. It was pretty difficult to like, as a kid who is like trying to run a module, I'm like, railroad tracks. They're ripping up my railroad tracks. And then also the things like with the mildly homophobic boy who's like making these annoying comments, and then my other friend who's gay being like, well, your paladin just used lay on hands to heal me, so yes, please lay your hands on me, and just like making him go like bonkers. It was hilarious. So I had those like experiences of people. That particular friend, I went to their house. I realized I was a lesbian in a game that their dad played for, like set up for us, like a one shot where we played characters, and my character was like trying to get this like boy character to do something, and like to help us. It was like but I insulted him by accident, and so then he was like, well, if you give me a kiss, I'll do it. And I was like, ew. And then I was like, wait a second, where's this ew coming from? So my early childhood experiences were 40, and then I didn't play in high school. I got to college and I started GMing, and that's why I created Adventure College, my own setting, eventually to be like a satirical magic punk setting where we could make fun of things like Instagram with Witchtagram and eye crystals, and deal with the flying blackbird pointer drones, and then afterwards like record your cool shots on your eye crystal and put them on Witchtagram. And it's a very fun like setting that I made for my first Kickstarter last year. You can actually get it as an add-on for the one that we're talking about today, which is this one. Oh, I can't actually post because I'm not logged into Twitch, so I'll have to let you post the link. But yeah, but basically exploration of oneself through living as others is, yeah, exactly. That is exactly why I kind of got into D&D in the first place. And then as I got older, I realized other systems existed, and it's been harder and harder to persuade myself to keep playing 5e, which is why you get to the content I'm currently making, which is including 5e compatible stuff for my player base that I know is that, but also is at the same time largely system agnostic. About 10 out of every 12 pages in this book are system agnostic. How's it going, Molly?
I appear to have posted. I have appear to have posted, and then I appear to have posted another link in error that I no longer know how to delete.
Yeah, nobody
I'm
clicked that
having an
link.
error. No
It's all
surprises.
good. I'll distract everyone. So, guys, this is Marble. Marble uses they, them pronouns. Marble is an adorable baby unicorn who is in my actual like brand ambassador. Yeah, so Marble's really cool. And yeah, and I've been playing a lot of different games for a long time, and I found that I prefer games with a narrative heavy focus, where character exploration is a big part of the game, ideally where it can be woven into the mechanics to some extent of the game. And I or where the mechanics aren't too punishing that you can't make a character decision. But I've also played with a lot of min-maxers over the years, and one thing that I do like about introducing romance and relationships into games, besides the fact that if we're playing a simulationist game, if we're playing a role-playing game, like not having any kind of relationship, whether that's parents or lovers or siblings, like you can avoid that and have a fully fleshed out character, but you can also use those to flesh out a character, and being able to come into them naturally just gives them more freedom of expression. But beyond that, when you have min-maxers at a table and one of them has a partner who is also a member of the party, whether an NPC or a PC, and that person goes down and they're the paladin, they're the tank, they're supposed to be wailing on the baddie, and the GM is like, well, what you could do is you could keep doing this and keep saving your friends by being in the front lines, but your partner is down there bleeding out on the ground. And it's like you have to make these decisions around party tactics. It's like, okay, we keep the two of them together now, or okay, like we do these different things. And I think during my final boss battle for one of my playtests for my previous thing, the Adventure College Student Handbook, there was a moment where my players had brought into the game, like they brought a bunch of allies with them. They also like made pepper spray because they were going against the beholder, and they were like, all right, we're gonna get those eyes. So they like did this whole like plant growth, get all the spiciest peppers you can, and they forgot to test one NPC for combat readiness, and I really encouraged them to. But they just brought her along because everyone loved her. She was a girlfriend of one of the players, or like characters. They brought her along, and she got killed in one hit after she rushed in to protect her girlfriend, her love interest. And the players, were so devastated. I realized how invested they were in this character, and it was so nice for me to feel their pain, because it meant that I was doing my job. I had a character that they loved, and I gave them the option to either bring her back or severely weaken the boss. And of course, they brought her back, and then they rallied around her and made sure she didn't go down again. Those sorts of character turning points, they're not always as dramatic. Sometimes they're just like, you're having a conflict with a partner who's homesick, who wants to keep traveling with you, but is homesick. Or you're having, your character has a traumatic past and is trying to open up, but maybe that's just like not super easy if they've been used to being taken advantage of by charming and generous people in the past. Um, there are all of these ways that I think on and off the battlefield, romance and relationships can lead to character drama and character growth. And I think having grown up exploring my identity through stepping into this like fantasy world, I really want to let other players do that well. And especially as a trans person, most of the media about like trans romantic interests, I have to say, is very stereotypical or hypersexualized. And so when creating this project, we were like, why don't we do 4 guys, 4 gals, and 4 non-binary pals so that we can show a breadth of trans experience, which also like isn't their main plot line, isn't their main issue that they're gonna have,
Yeah,
but
they're not like,
yeah.
this isn't the non-binary character, and it's like, oh, there's all this work and development into like,
Right.
oh no, it's just like they're over there.
Yeah. And it's just
And
like,
if they're
right.
feeling bad, you tap them on the back and you say, they're there.
Yeah, they're there, if they use they them their pronouns anyway. Um, but yeah, so that's my kind of my gaming background. Right now I play a lot of one shots. I play a lot of indie RPGs, and I intend to shift focus into making my own systems in general over the next few months, while continuing to put out content compatible with what I've done before, and working on the Kinks and Cantrips sequel, and a few other friends' projects, just helping them get out there.
That's really awesome. I think like I think like a self exploration through games is really interesting, and I do think that that's a key bit of the trans experience. I remember when I was going through like my first interviews for like for my informed consent clinic in 2020,
Ooh.
and it was like I was sitting there talking with them, and they're like, I had just come from work, so it's like max butch. I'm talking like button down, like all this stuff. It's one of the first times a stranger is calling me by my real name. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how do I do this? Like, and it's like, all right, I've been using the name Molly in games since I was 6. My
Hmm.
original Pokemon Blue save was
Aw.
Mali, real talk. Molly to death. It's always that's one of the things. So like Fiona was just like a yes name, or did you go through the Rolodex?
Well, Fiona was my parents' given name, and it's my middle name, to be honest. But I at this point in time, but I still enjoy it. I have a relationship with it that is different than the relationship I had when I was young, and probably healthier, and well, definitely healthier. And for me, my parents named me after a book series called The Chronicles of Amber. And Fiona is this powerful sorceress in the series. And it's
Already so interested in this
right. So it's
woman.
about a
Powerful
Machiavellian
sorceress. I'm
family of
here.
immortals who arguably author the universe or the multiverse while they transverse it. And so as they move between multiverses, one of them is our world. And some of them have reflections of they're all reflections of the one true world, and some of them have reflections of the family of immortals who are from the true world, including Fiona. So these worlds are all referred to as shadow worlds, shadow Earth. So the joke is that the joke is I am actually this like in this multiverse from the Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny, and that I am a shadow of Fiona. So that's like where the joke comes from. And
Stranger
I took
things have happened.
Yeah, and I took it. I did experiment when I decided I wanted my own unique name. I experimented with several, and I did so largely through gaming. Actually, I did like my original Dragon Age origin saves and stuff like that. And then eventually, yeah, quite the dedicated fan base. I am the like entire no. There's a lot of older people who like the series. It's very good. So it's one of those things where sometimes when I am in a chat room and I want to get people talking, and I know it's a bunch of older people, I'm like, Chronicles of Amber, and there's like several people come in.
A chat room? Are you signing on to like Yahoo Messenger?
Oh no, I meant Discord chat rooms. That's where most of my
Ooh.
social media happens.
You hang out with older people on Discord? I thought there was like an upper limit. Or are you referring to like me as a 30 something as older people?
No, 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 no. Most of my friends are 20s and 30s, but and I sometimes game with people who are much older than that. I'm pretty intergenerational, and I guess always have been. I've always made friends up, or dated up when I was little, and so not that little,
Not too up.
not that. No, no, that's not what I meant. But But when I was like, when I was in high school, my close friends and my crushes were all in college, and stuff like that. And I always just like my friends. I made friends with adults, so I think, and I love to game with my dad. And I've run some very silly like Father's Day themed one shots for him and my brother. And my mom started playing the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so she got us into D&D. So
Oh,
I've
so
always,
you just were doomed at birth. You just kind of
yeah,
you got your
yes.
first set of dice coming out of the womb,
Pretty
basically.
much. Yeah, I was
Woof.
born with a D20 in my hand, as the
I mean,
story goes.
I mean that's fair. I,
Mhm.
you came by it honestly. I'm sure having been born into an AD&D family earns a lot of respect amongst maybe the grognardier humans of the world.
The
And
grognardier.
I believe that's the term, yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
So, that's wicked. So as I'm going through, and I run my own world on this network, in
Sounds
my series called The Concord and Tales of the Concord. Um, for shows and for people running their home games, for my friend who's running a Ravnica home game here in my basement on Wednesday nights.
Oh, nice,
Um,
nice, nice.
why should we be adding more romanceable characters and using romanceable character guides to their tabletop games using products like yours?
Right. I think that's a very good question. I think the first thing that should be answered with this is why romance? Like, why do we put that into our games? And the really short and simple answer uh, is basically that, well, the really short and simple answer, uh, which is to truncate the answer that I've already given, because I gave a pretty lengthy one, right? Is this idea of like, well, they can provide motivation, they can provide conflict, they can provide perspective. If you're playing another character either to project a part of yourself and explore it, or to, explore someone different than yourself, you have the opportunity, whether it's across sexuality and gender lines, or whether it's just across like principles lines. When you're playing Baldur's Gate 3, I have a very hard time doing evil playthroughs, but you better believe I'm gonna start my second run and go straight for Minthara, because there are fun aspects of these characters, um, all of them. And, with a harsh character like Lazelle, who comes across very like strict and harsh in these games, but has, so much going on in her backstory, which makes her that way. Like nobody is not affected by how they were nurtured. And a lot of the time when you're getting to know a character in D&D, you're pretty much like, a lot of the time for a lot of people, there's an agenda. The agenda isn't to get to know this character; it's to move
Keep
through
track
the
of your
world.
homework assignments. That's what I
Yeah,
use my agenda for.
right. It's the homework assignments. It's like you're trying to, find out about the missing person. You're trying to get information on the evil king. You're trying to whatever it is. And you're not just slowing down and saying like, how does my character enjoy this person? And sometimes you do. And those I've noticed those sorts of organic things happening where I'd feel this sense of tension and I'd lean into it and I'd say something flirty or salacious as a character, and my players would love it and build off of it. And then we'd wind up having a lot of these conversations about, especially in college, running a college themed game, about consent and about various issues that were like important to us and we'd had experiences with in the real world that we were able to talk about through this sort of allegory of this fantasy thing, whether it's like in my adventure college setting. I introduce a like in order to get around fear and confusion attacks. There's a like the reason that I introduce that's the reason I introduced these drugs, which are referred to as emotion stoppers. And the idea is you take somebody, you can exhale your emotion into a vial and then sell it. And then somebody can take that vial and inhale it and get your emotion. So get your rage or get your something like that to not be hit by the fear spell or the confusion ray from the beholder or whatnot. Um,
Feel
and
like I wouldn't have had such a bad time in college if we were allegedly selling bottled rage instead of
right.
what we were actually doing. That would have
Right,
been
and but
better.
you know what? It was a very interesting thing where there was a party at a punk house in my game, and they were, one of the villainous people. She was, trying to purposefully make people enraged so she could like suction it up using a Arcano tech. And there was this conversation about this like character who'd become a fan favorite, and so I kept bringing her back, who was like had a lot of she had a lot of like pent up like being closeted basically, and so she was like getting it out, and very clearly like in this like mutually like we're gonna kind of slap each other around and run off kind of thing with somebody, and the players were like, well, wait a second, and this is what I wanted them to do. I sort of like one of them was like, well, I guess like nothing's wrong with it, right, if they're both like, and they were like, wait a second, like we need to stop this. And so then it suddenly became like part of the session was like getting this character to cool her jets, and doing so in a way that didn't get them punched out because she was like high on rage, on a barbarian's rage that wasn't her own, essentially. But getting her to like realize, because we had this conversation about like, well, wait a second, like, it's just emotion. But it's also like when you're in an emotionally heightened state, you're vulnerable in a different way. And so my players were like, and I didn't initially like intend this to be what happened, but it became something that we built off of each other, and we went down this rabbit hole. And it was, I think, very cathartic for me to see my group of players being like, we're going to avoid this like accidental gray area thing happening. And I loved that. And it was the kind of thing where I was like, you know what? Like, this is a group of college students who are now like primed to be active bystanders in a situation like this in real life, because they have some amount of experience intervening, even though it's not real experience. But like, hey, I decided I
How
didn't
many
want to.
times have you had a conversation with yourself, like, in the mirror, right?
Yeah,
Before you go out and you have it, like,
exactly.
who hasn't done an interview prep before? Like, give me a break. Yeah, of course,
And
it definitely helps.
And so I think like not only do we motivate ourselves to make character driven decisions on and off the battlefield if we're having these relationships, but it also like I wrote for Kinks and Cantrips and edited for them, which is this like kink and D&D fifth edition thing, and it got a lot of people into D&D. And so I co-wrote especially the introduction to safety and role play, and I really enjoyed that. And as a neurodivergent person and the sensitivity reader for the book, I was especially thinking about my own experiences and like, how do I make tools like the X card or things where you have to out yourself to intervene easier to do? Like, I suggest GMs demonstrate using them. I suggest like coming up with, I heard a really great example from an older person yesterday on a panel about sex and romance and relationships and games of like having everybody have two cards and making it very normal to initiate a check-in. Everybody puts a card in. If there are any X's, then that's an X. And so you can like anonymously X card in that way. And the GM will do it purposefully extra times, so like more than is necessarily necessary. But like, and whenever there's like that emotionally tense situation, I like doing stuff like that. And I also like providing nonverbal alternatives. And, as somebody who obviously like, coming from the BDSM safety background, I am aware that there are situations in which somebody cannot speak effectively and still needs to be able to say, like, I want this to stop. And so, like, taking these lessons and putting them into the game. And then I was really heartened at this conference I was at this last weekend to hear everybody talking about like session 0, round 0, and reaction in real time, as I put it, are these 3 different things that I talk about in the introduction to Dungeons and Datemates. So we're doing, it's a fully safe for work product, but we're still talking about romance. And so you still have to have these conversations like, may I kill your lover? Is it okay for me to off your girlfriend? Or is that going to screw you up? And you need to have these conversations, but also character loss and character grief, like that can be incredibly motivating, but so can just wanting to impress somebody.
And this is actually
Mhm.
like I'm sorry I'm jumping all
I'm
over
sorry
you,
I
but
talk a lot. Feel free to interrupt
you
me.
are very well spoken, and I'm really enjoying hearing you talk. But I my other job outside of my day job, other than this, is that I work for a LARP company, and one of the products that we do is
Oh,
TTRPG in a castle. Which is just a weekend long. I do a whole D&D campaign in 22 hours,
oh
and
wow.
it's right. But one of the things about it is like, so you have 22 hours, you can only do so much, and I have to have this conversation a lot with my players. Is it like, is it okay if I kill your character?
Hmm.
And it's amazing how many people at my tables have never been asked that.
Right.
Or like when they hear that, they're like, they say something like, oh well, if it doesn't make sense for the story. And it's like, no, it's like, this is a question me to you. Like, the threat is still going to be real. It will just be whether I sink 2 attacks into your down body or if I go after your friend. Like,
Yeah.
talk to
And I
me,
think
this is a game.
And I think also one thing that people forget in this conversation is that via figuring out what stakes somebody doesn't like, you can also figure out what stakes they do like, and you can actually up the ante in some ways. Like if somebody, and you can ask people that too. And I love in my session 0. So the way I do it is I have session 0, which is before we start playing, and like our first play session. It's like the first hour as well. And sometimes it becomes the whole first, what would have been the first play session. Or sometimes we'll have our characters together for an like out of canon, like pre or in canon, like
The beach
pre-campaign,
episode.
a beach episode, exactly. And so we have this conversation then, and I ask people privately to share lines and veils. So for those who don't know, lines and veils is a concept which is basically like a line is something you do not want to ever have to deal with. So for me, like a line might be, I don't want violence against children in my games. And then a veil is something that you're okay with existing and coming up, but you'd like to fade to black. It's over a lot of people. A good example of that would be sex. And in a lot of movies, that is something that happens. But if you're playing a game that's like Kinks and Cantrips, you might get more specific about like what kinds of sex and when. But then you also need to be able to have like this conversation at the beginning of each session. So, for example, an example that I use is that I'm sober. I don't drink alcohol. And it's a veil for me. I don't like characters in my games when I'm trying to relax who have excessive alcohol use or alcoholism as a flaw or a trait or an activity. But sometimes it comes a line. Some sessions I say, hey, like I'm having a particularly hard time because I've been exposed to people drinking this week more than usual. I would like this to be aligned. So like, your character who I'm normally fine with doing brewer's supplies or whatnot, like we're not going to do that. So in my first book, Adventure College, I also like made a tea house location and stuff like that. But I think that there's lines and veils. There's the X card, which is the idea of just giving somebody something that they can hold up, or that they can. And online games, obviously, you have to think about alternative ways to do this, but something that they can hold up, or a way that they can just like non-verbally kind of communicate, like, "Hey, we've crossed the line." And then there's also the version that I prefer of the X card, which is the red alert, yellow alert version, which has been popularized in Star Trek Adventures books recently, which is basically like red alert, there's a line, we need to reset the scene, we need to stop, reset the scene, or move the scene forwards after assessing if we need to do self-care or community care for each other. And then there's yellow alert, which is this is cool, but we need to veil it. We need to move on, like kind of thing. So those are some common safety tools, and I'm thinking about how to put them in the phrase of romance for the introduction to my book more specifically. But you initially asked why do romance, and so it comes down for me to character motivation. So each of these like date mates in my book is about 10 pages of system agnostic writing. In my latest Kickstarter update, you can see like the layout for how I do the sectioning I talked about. And so it's like a character overview, and then it's a deep dive into how do they flirt? How do they physically move around and flirt? How do they, what's their baggage? Like they each have a backstory, and their backstory, instead of like roll to seduce, the idea is that the player has to gather information through role play about
You mean
them,
I
and
can't
then
just crit? Yeah, I can't just be eloquence bard and have the
yeah,
biggest
no, you
the
can't. You
12
can't just
person
put
spell
20
people.
levels in seduction and be good.
Oh,
And
but why
so
did I kill all those
I
goblins?
know, right? Like, so
I have
it's
to
and
like get to know the character or something.
I fully encourage, oh my gosh, I keep kicking my light. Sorry, guys. I fully encourage GMs to sometimes call for roles and use them in this. But at the same time, I'm creating a pathway and ways that, they have baggage. And then how does the player notice this baggage, or like, how does it come up? And then how do they get into a scene where they kind of confront it and they talk through it? And then how do they overcome and move forwards past that conversation? And so, for example, for Luca, who you see in the center, and one second.
Boy, it's the golden retriever, babe. If you have questions for Fiona, please put them in chat
Oh,
and we
also,
will
I
touch
love
on them.
Breezy's
Okay.
death is the only the final step of character development. Very accurate, and sometimes not the final. But yeah, but I think the way that I do it is I think about for Luca, for example, in the middle, Luca's character concept is that, he's an attractive farm boy, but his parents were ready to retire when a con artist swindled them. A very generous and charming person came into their life and said, if you invest with me, I'll make you able to retire even better, even more lavishly. And it all seemed good, and then took their holdings. And so Luca and his siblings were like, well, our parents are ready to retire, so we're all going to set out and go into the world and do adventures and send money home so that they can still retire. So Luca's a wildlife researcher and cartographer, but he is no longer able to take people at face value easily. And so for Luca, like he's afraid to take risks and assume good intentions when it comes to people. So, like, if asked on a date, if there's any room to interpret, he's gonna think this is not a date. He's gonna think it's not romantic. Maybe it's salacious. But when he starts to fall for somebody, he feels conflicted, and his dog can notice, and his dog runs interference. And then the player can notice his dog acting out in a way that it maybe shouldn't, because it's very well trained normally, or notice Luca like signaling it depending on how you want to play it. So I give the GM these different ideas. Like for a character who's more likely to notice like a pattern of events, you can focus on the dog. More likely to be like, what is Luca doing when this is happening? You can like have Luca signaling the dog to like come over and give me pets, or give me like lap time. And basically, once a player notices this and has enough knowledge about Luca to know how to approach Luca about this effectively, he will disclose more about his past than he has already. He'll identify the connection to his present behavior, his like inability to take things at face value. Where my suggestions are like, he likes to travel with a group, but his dog's one head always his dog one head has its eyes open all through the night, like in shifts. He always sleeps with one pair of eyes open, basically. Whenever they set up camp, he feels the need to immediately go forage or get firewood or do something to contribute. If somebody gives him a healing potion or spends a rare reagent on him, he will offer to repay them for it, even if it was in a battle where he was like fighting on their behalf. And then if declined, he might use his herbalism skills and stay up late at night trying to create something of equivalent value as a gift back, essentially, because he worries that
I'm feeling very
generosity is
perceived. You're rolling a nat 20 perception
bad.
here, and
Right.
this is
And
a
so
little intense.
isn't that a relatable thing? Isn't it hard sometimes for all of us to take everybody at face value and not assume that there's a quid pro quo, there's a tit for tat in kindness that we receive? And so as Luca realizes this, he works to relax when he's getting gifts and to open up more. And he has a scrapbook, and so around the campfire he might start to share more stories from his previous adventures. And eventually, as he's prompted to, sort of like be comfortable opening up more, he will reveal my sample romance scene for him suggestion is that he reveals a section of his scrapbook entirely dedicated to the adventures he's had with his romantic interest, with mementos and sketches, and of course with doodles and dog fur in the margins. And each character has something like this. And I break it up into bite-sized chunks. So a player could also read this book, read just the character overview and the roleplay tips and the physicality and say, ooh, I want to get the $1 add-on for the character sheet and I want to play as Luca. Or a player could read that much and think, this is nice. I'm going to tell my GM this one. I want this one. Or your GM can introduce them all like a dating sim, or introduce them based on who you want, or just introduce them not intending for them to be a romantic relationship necessarily, because they all have rich backstories. But I do break it up to flirting, baggage, overcoming baggage, dating. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So here's the way I'm understanding this as like as it would be presented to a GM. Like I'm a new GM, I'm going to get this product and I'm going to implement it in my game, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously first set of things is like talking to my table, getting that out of the way. So once I get consent set up, everybody's ready to kind of include this product. I pop open the pages here. There are a number of characters that I'm going to look through, and there is like progression paths laid out for each one. Like there's like milestones, like when you hit this, it changes this
Eh,
way.
do you
What's
want
the DM experience?
I think the GM experience, if you want, you're welcome to show the free sample or I can post it maybe. No, I don't think I can post in chat if I'm not signed in. I
If you
forgot
throw
about
it to
that.
me on Discord, I'll grab it.
But yeah, so this is the link to the free sample. It's 20 pages and you can see everything except for the 5e mechanics. The 5e mechanics I kept out because I knew we were going to hit a stretch goal, which I was prepping for the whole time, but I didn't want to like say, here's the stretch goal mechanics too. Um, I think you might have
I'm just
posted
not
the
having a good day.
our
I'm not
chat, but
having a
that's
good
okay.
day.
Um, but my point is that if you look through this, the concept here is that if you want a juicy character and you want to spark character growth, you pick this up and you have 12 options. You very easily do not have to spend a lot of time inventing a character backstory that is incredibly rich. And most GMs know how to do that and enjoy doing that. But I know that I like to take a break sometimes. And so the idea is this is a character
What is
companion
break?
guide.
What is a break?
Right. I
I'm
mean,
not
the way I
familiar with
talk, you wouldn't
this.
know. I just keep talking and talking and talking.
That's another word for burning out?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty
Okay,
much.
cool. As a
Um,
neurodivergent creator on a
oh
channel
yeah.
filled with other neurodivergent creators, we
Oh
pretty
yeah.
much know working full tilt or completely dead. That's kind of our balance. So thank you for
I
clearing that
used
up
to be
for us.
that. I used to be on a pendulum swing there too, and I'm trying to find the balance. And I think I noticed that when I was writing for Kingston Cantrips and I was writing for or editing for them and I was writing for my characters, I noticed that there weren't a lot of huge character studies. So in a sense, this is a character this is 12 character studies. Like the literary perspective on this is that this is 12 character studies, but not in story mode for your story. So this provides you everything you need to take a character and really, really dig into them and create somebody who is going to be, whether you tweak it or you just take it and run with it, somebody who not only has gorgeous art, but this is like a 120-page book and it has optional 5e mechanics, including stat blocks that scale to the party level so that they stay relevant as the party levels up. Because a lot of people, they're in years or months long campaigns and they might have a character who is their character's partner for years or months, and they don't want that to be taken away from them because they died in a stupid way because they weren't leveling up with everybody else. But the mechanics are also still centered around highlighting character abilities and letting the characters do more things. And once you hit a certain point, you unlock in your relationship, you do like start to get more powers or they start to get more powers. I'm also exploring with the ideas of some mechanics either for this because it wasn't promised or for something else of just like mechanizing relationships. But that's a whole other thing. That would be like sort of having like a, lover's vengeance type thing. Like
Uh,
my lover was wounded, I wound better.
what about the Pikachu tears reviving Ash
Mm,
in the Pokemon movie? What if It's just as you were talking about that, for some reason, that's what came to my mind.
Yeah,
So
but like I'm really excited. So I think this project is for me a labor of intense love and wanting to share characters who offer some very relatable themes, whether it's homesickness and struggling to commit to somebody because it means committing to leaving another place, or somebody like Luca, or somebody like Flora, who's the other free sample person, who she is, like you were saying with the burnout thing, she goes and goes and goes because she loves the thrill of combat, and she worries that makes her a bad person because in her hometown it was all artists and she defended them from raiders and was a hero, and then was like, I'm bored, I loved this, everybody else hated this. Maybe I need to go fight for selfless causes so I don't become like a self-indulgent, wantonly violent person, which she is a very kind character. But um, as you like get to know her, you get to continue to realize that she is not letting herself do anything self-indulgent for fear that it's like a slippery slope. And then I have other characters and I've given them each kind of unique powers. We have a spirit summoner character who is a goth by dress, but also is just from a place that was very cold, and so dresses in all black in order to preserve heat and sunlight. And everyone seems to assume, correctly, that she likes death, but or not likes death, but it likes helping dead people. But she and her awakened rat therapize spirits in exchange for being able to temporarily invite them in and like use their powers, basically, almost like a reverse possession. Or Brax, the tiefling, who can teleport using tarot cards and do telepathy using tarot cards. So I'm trying to like create very rich things which you could take and put in your other game, but for 5e, you can just take these CR scaling stat blocks. You can take all of this information and run with it. And you have enough to supply you for either a one shot that is incredibly silly and sexy, or a campaign where you want a character to grow and you want shared character growth to be catalyzed through them with a player in your party. Noticing a viewer question: from being an origin where the LGBT plus community has only slightly begun to have any influence at all, one can't help but be curious, and even more so to hear it from someone who seems so knowledgeable in it, to divulge a little, if our star guest would be so kind to explain a little from the layman from outside, things like system neutral or the other various core values. Oh, that's a really interesting point. So system neutral means, do you mean like what do I mean by system neutral on the Kickstarter page?
Yeah, I system neutral doesn't have any, is just about tabletop, like tabletop systems. So you have like Pathfinder, you have Monster of the Week, you have Tales of the Valiant, you have
Mhm.
what's a really old simulationist one, or whatever, or Mage or Vampire the Masquerade, and those are all systems. And something that is system agnostic or is system neutral can be just thrown in. You can take Luca, and Luca could very easily be a space farmer in Galaxy of Darkness.
Right,
Like,
and actually, yeah, like that's the idea. And if we hit our next stretch goal, we will put in sci-fi variants as well with art and with. I will rewrite some of the descriptions because the romance progression is like pretty much the same, but their backstory. For example, that goth bard. My idea for her was that, or not bard, sorry, goth spirit summoner. My idea for her backstory is that if you're in a high fantasy campaign, she comes from a cold like mountain region, and if you're in a sci-fi campaign, she comes from a like cold spaceship without a lot of resources, and where like routinely there was like they were unable to do heat control effectively. But also, either so like rewriting it to be about that, or like
yeah,
Flora, rewriting her to be about taking care of her spaceship or her bike as opposed to taking care of her like mount.
cool.
um, and so I just like little things like that, like the gift guides or the art updates or the stat blocks, like what is she attacking with? Like if it's not like it's a laser spear essentially, as opposed to, or whatever it is. But system neutral just means that the first 10 pages of each chapter of this book, or so, the first like 8 to 10 pages is stuff that you can take as a character and put into any mechanics. And then if you're running 5e D&D, which I know a lot of my base is, you have the 5e mechanics, but I'm personally trying to get away from 5e myself in my own gaming, and I'm aware that a lot of other people are too. So my hope is that we do really well and we hit a higher stretch tier goal where I'm planning to ask Jen actually to translate them into Pathfinder 2e compatibility. So if we do really well and hit $7,700, my plan was to ask if Jen if I could hire her to do that.
I'm
But
sure she would
yeah,
love that.
yeah, and so
There
but
are
my
also
yeah,
wonderful 5e
mhm,
games that are not run by the big Wizards company.
yeah,
There's a wonderful game called Tales of the Valiant being put out by Cobalt Press.
yeah,
We've
yeah,
run
yeah,
their
yeah.
products before, and that's been a lot of fun. Check it out, Tales of the Valiant into Avernus. And then that'll be on our YouTube page, streams from last year, and then during the alpha test.
Mhm,
And then also there's Level Up 5e by N World, which has also been
mm.
very popular. And it's if you're a mechanics girly like me, or if you're a mechanics they, you will love Level Up 5e because it's rich, it's juicy. So love you some 5e even without the D&D.
Right. And I think that the other thing is that a lot of people game for more of a narrative or simulationist experience, and a lot of people game for more of a crunchy numbers experience. And um, I think that personally, this product can cater to either. And the main reason I think that is that I really think that, if you have a traveling adventurer companion, somebody like Lazel or Shadowheart or Will or Gail, like, you make different decisions based off of those people. If you're doing a role play game, if you're playing it on, Baldur's Gate 3, they're not going to react negatively if you choose not to like heal them when they go down or whatnot. But when you are playing a game at a table with a game master or a player who's playing a character who you are romancing, you have this sort of like accountability of actions, which makes it harder to min max because you have to say like, who am I in this space? Is it reasonable for me to still behave in the like rules like min maxy sort of way, or do I have to make a decision to go protect somebody? Um,
Like,
yeah,
and that's the thing is like, if you're interested in playing war games, Wicked, play war games, and you may even find that this can supplement your war game. But like this uh, role playing is optimal. Like,
yeah,
I'm gonna say it, like, as a big optimizer, like, just because I can summon hell on earth at level 3 for you does not mean that's what I would do. My character has to make mistakes and get angry and get in someone's
mhm,
face and do something gross. Like, that is the best way to play this game, because it's like, this is just a story. You know
yeah,
what I don't remember? The fight where I cast the exact right spell and ended it, where I cast a lightning bolt and killed all the kobolds.
right.
I don't care.
People
Um,
don't remember the nat sometimes they do, but people don't tend to remember the ability they used to win a fight. A year later, they remember the story. They remember how it made them feel. Like, I told that story from that big boss battle. Like, I do remember the pepper spray thing because they did a whole thing with it, but I don't remember too much about like what spells they used. I just remember, the looks on their faces when I killed this puka and what they did to bring her back, and it was so heartwarming. And I think that for me, I always love writing, villains who have relatable reasons for behaving badly. People who are not, I don't believe people are like evil. I believe people sometimes do evil things, or untoward or
the
nasty
road to
things.
hell is paved with good intentions.
Right. And so that's why writing, it's like also why baggage. It's like why romance in the game. Also, why am I saying it's flirting, baggage, dating? Like why am I doing that as the escalator? And the reason for that is because I feel like, you have even in Baldur's Gate 3, it's a great example. You have Lazel or Shadowheart are the two characters I've romanced so far, and both of them have
Carlac meta. Let's go.
both
Get
of them
burned.
well
Get
both of them have a
burned.
hang up to being able to be super real with you, or super relaxed with you, and as the game goes on they start to work through that a little bit, as their plot lines are resolved. So I was like, what if I create these characters who have tons of story hooks? Like, you can just pull story hooks out of any section of their backstory or their romance or their interests, and also have this like clear scaffolding. And that's why it's system neutral, is because the scaffolding to progress your relationship is not like in Stardew Valley, give them enough gifts of X, Y, and Z, but don't give them like A, B, and C that they don't like. And it's not like, make a skill challenge happen, roll 3 successes before 3 failures. Instead, it's like, here's different ways you could prompt your player to notice what's going on with this character, or why their poor behavior is not like that they don't like your character, but that something else is going on. And if you can interact with that and progress through it, and develop your character to do so as a result, then you get to the the extra unlocks in their stat block, and you get to them giving you gifts which could be mechanically useful. I kind of do an inverse gift guide, where like it's a guide to what skills they have that they could give you, and I give 5e examples from the SRD and from maybe a little bit from my own book, but you can also take that and run with it in other ways, in other systems. And so for me, I really like that idea of, saying like, these are wonderful people, and your relationship is going to be deeper with them and your own character if it's not just, hey, babe, my bedroll's available. Do you want to like help warm it up for me? I'm really cold after, all my clothing was ripped off by the battle axe in that fight. Like, if it's like more than that, I think that there is a lot of potential.
So, Fiona,
Mhm.
you have one sending spell. On the other end of this sending spell, you have 25 words. You are going to give one piece of advice for someone who is starting their transition. What do you say? Oh, you only got
First of all,
25 words.
I've absolutely loved every time you've thrown me a like really trans focused question. Absolutely loved it.
We gotta keep them guessing. We just gotta like really deep game dev stuff, really deep trans
Well,
stuff.
what would you say? What would you say?
No, we're interviewing you.
Um, if a label doesn't give you something, it's not worth sticking with. It's okay to just know what you're not. Seek
Yay!
cuddles. Seek cuddles? I think seek cuddles.
Cuddles.
I was like dog, cat. Like I was just that moment, like practice little joys. Would be my conclusion to that.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Um, who are if you could name 3 indie creators in the tabletop space that have had an impact on you or have inspired you, who would they be?
That is a fantastic question.
And bonus
Um,
points if they're queer.
right. That's where I'm like, ooh, which queer creators can I lift up? Well, first of all, I'd really like to lift up. I think Kinks and Cantrips is a fantastic project, not just because I'm still looking for an all-sapphic group to play with me, but but also because I worked with the creator very personally and gave a lot of feedback to somebody which could have been like not taken well. I am critical as a sensitivity reader and an editor,
That's your
and
job.
whether it was editing or sensitivity reading, every single time that I sent something that I had any social anxiety about to Stellara Books, to T.S. Michaels, their response was phenomenal. It was like always like, yes, I see what you're saying. Here's where I'm coming from, that I want to keep. Like, and it was always like, it was never like, I think I'm not down. It was never like a no. It was always a yes and. It was always like a yes and, I get this totally, like, but it was in a very kind way. And so I would definitely throw that out there. And then also, are you able to do shout outs like to Twitch? Because also, one of my D&D, okay, I'd shout out a couple of my D&D group members who are both small streamers, and they one of them one of them makes dice as well, and one of them is currently making his own system that I'm hoping to help him kickstart. And if you all are interested, you're welcome to join my Discord, where we chat about his system and all sorts of other people's systems in design and feedback space. But I would shout out Solo Grayson and Dan Drake Arts. So is what's Dan Drake's full Twitch? Let me pull it up. So in my server, I let people who have hit a certain level post in self-promotion, which you get via just like answering the RPG questions of the day and so forth. So I'll just pull Dan's out of there. It's Dan Drake Arts. So I recommend Dan Drake Arts and Solo Grayson as two really cool small creators who are in my D&D group, and they're freaking awesome. And while they might not have like their own content out, the way that they play the game has impacted me immensely. They're both dating characters in my current game, and they also are, after my first session, when I asked for feedback, Solo Grayson, Jamie, turned to me and was like, "There's really good representation in your game. I've never played a game with more queer people, like trans characters and women. Where are the guys? There are no men." And I was like, "Oh shit!" And I'd like realized I'd populated a world almost without men. And then that was a really good prompt. And then also said to me after a game, D&D is a dating sim. Like, where's my like options? And I was like, is it? It is. And then I was like, if D&D is a dating sim, then you need a lot of cuties. So I'm going to write them. And so I started writing them, and then I made this book. And that's like this plug and play book of these 12 characters. And then Dan Drake is just fantastic. It makes beautiful art, and is really inventive, and has been like making is working on making a really cool indie system. So the three of them, T.S. Michaels / Stellara Books, the creators of Kinks and Cantrips, are phenomenal people. They're phenomenal people, and I very much am excited to work on the next KNC product. Other people who I feel like deserve a shout out is one person I would say who I know who is queer, who makes cool content, which also has a bit of a how should I say this? Like, y'all know I'm making 4 non-binary characters. I'm talking about consent. I'm talking about all this shit. So I guess like a little bit of a social like trying to so that's what it is. Social consciousness raising would be the oh, man, it's like Big Empty Blue is the name of their world, I think. Big Empty Blue Kickstarter, and they're gonna be Marco Antonio Piana. I've really enjoyed the combination of graphic novel and like Kickstarter content that they're doing. Ellie Earhart, who is the artist for my stuff, is phenomenal. So I worked with Ellie Earhart, and she is a wonderful creator also of graphic memoirs. So who knows, maybe we'll also go down that path one day. But those are some people who I think are phenomenal.
Absolutely love it. So let's
Yeah.
do it for the clip. 30 seconds. Dungeons and Datemates. What is?
Dungeons and Datemates is a plug and play companion guide with 12 characters, 4 guys, 4 gals, and 4 non binary pals, all of whom are hot as hell. But not only that, they have their own. Was I not supposed to swear during this?
No,
Uh,
I'm saying true. It's true in
okay, thank
ASL.
you. They're all hot, but also more than that, they all come with their own baggage, backstories, and motivations, which are designed to encourage character decisions and growth at the table. They're meant to spark interpersonal drama and spark reasoning. How would my character interact with this person and why? And to make you dig a little deeper into that self exploration and that relationship exploration. Um, they are all carefully written to make people go, but also to make people have to take a step back and analyze within their character as opposed to from the outside a little bit, ideally. hmm So it's a companion guide. It's 12 characters companion guide, a plug and play into your own system or use the D&D 5e materials.
Wicked. Question from the audience: where do you pull your character concepts from?
I brainstorm. I'm lucky to work with one of my good friends as the artist on this project and my previous, Adventure College, which you can also get as an add-on for that project. And so she and I had all of these ideas, and I sat down with her. And the way that we work is kind of like I give her it's my project overall, like it's my creation, it's my impulse, it's my design, but it's both of ours. It's both of ours. Like even though I'm like the creator, she is also involved, and she gets the final decision on all art stuff, even after my input. And she gives me input that I take. And so I had a really fun time. We sat down for 4 hours when I had these character concepts, and I said, "What about this? What about this?" And we did this long brainstorm. And so my recommendation is to find somebody who you can brainstorm with, and do
My
challenges
partner
with.
Avery, like my partner Avery,
Mhm.
I like shout out to you, sweet one. I love you so much. This
Aw.
is like all we. This is like if I am like I don't know what else I'm gonna do today. Like I will sit down with them and be like, so this culture, right? It's like what if the Incan people lived in the northern Rockies and like what would that culture be like?
Mm.
And
How the
it's
mountains affect their cultural development.
how would
Mhm.
just being around frozen and like what if
Mhm.
and so we're just spitballing off each other. It's the most chaotic ADHD energy us feeding
Yeah.
off of each other, and it's delicious. I
But then
really
also
having a
oh,
writing
sorry.
buddy.
I think find a writing buddy, but also, Breezy, since you mentioned, like, kind of it sounds like there's this, there's an anime out there I'll recommend with the caveat that while it to me gave me a lot of non-binary representation that I really liked and an experience I could relate to of, being mistaken for another gender and rolling with it, sometimes in high school and stuff like that. It's called Oran Academy High School Host Club, and it also uses the T slur a lot because it came out a long time ago. So it's like one of those things that my friend group and I, who are queer, we all watched in high school. I guess it was like my group's version of like how I think a lot of people relate to Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is something that I like from an external perspective. I'm like, this looks transphobic, but it's meaningful to so many people that like they love it, and that's valid. And I'm not going to yuck their yum. And so I think for me, Oran Academy High School Host Club was kind of that. And a couple of these, no, one of these characters was somewhat inspired from the Kyoyi. Wait, what was his name? Kyoya, I think was his name. Yeah, Oran Kyoya. And then um, the buff animal nerd, this guy Luca, in no way definitely was not me looking at like this idea of this like sweet farmer like him like kind of thing that people like. Sometimes I take tropes and I think, how can I twist them? So for example, the goth spirit summoner, my idea is that she comes from a community where everybody composts the dead, because they are resource starved, and this is just like dying and death is just very normal, integrated into the community. You literally integrate it into the food that you eat. And her pet rat was like, yo, I think we'd be good at counseling departed spirits, let's do that. And they started doing that. And she's just like, also because of her like resource scarcity area, not getting enough sunlight, she just happens to have gotten comfortable wearing all black. So I take some of these ideas, or like Luca, I was like, okay, what if he's really nerdy? What would he be nerdy about? He'd be nerdy about animals. What if he's super nerdy for animals? He loves scrapbooking. Like just taking these ideas of what are some of these tropes that I know people like, this like kind of bear-like sweet farmer guy, and how can I like kind of twist them into something a little bit more inspired.
Scroll Instagram and just be like, what if they lived in a fantasy setting? Just like look at someone like just
Mhm.
as you're going through and like somebody who fell down in a river, just like you don't really know that much about them, just kind of spin a yarn about someone. There
Yeah.
are also great books that just kind of have like a bunch of
Mhm.
questions that help you develop character, that
Yeah.
I really enjoy. So let's pivot, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
How you doing?
Good. I just was trying to see. I have my shelf of my creative writing textbooks, and I was like, there's like one. I was like, I should recommend this, and I can't find it. So,
So, speaking of creative writing,
yeah.
what is your favorite word?
Oh yeah, we're going into the personality quiz.
The suspense builds.
What's
It's
my
hard to
favorite?
pick one.
It's really
Let's
hard to pick
make
one up.
some ASMR.
Let's make some ASMR. Hi, folks. This is
Favorite word
Fiona.
ASMR.
We're here to talk to you about our favorite words. I actually really want to get into doing ASMR, but I think that it's kind of like some people look at it funny. Anyway,
Yes.
uh, what was I gonna say? Uh, this is super cheesy, but I like the word love a lot, um, and um, I can tell a story, but it's like really
Yes.
spiritual. Um, so I was trying to find like my relationship with like God or similar power if it exists in high school, and so I started looking at the word and how people like write the word, and like I knew people who would write like G_D to represent this kind of like not knowingness, um, and I had this thought come to me, which was like, well, there are two words I can think of that people will fight wars over the definitions of, or like the qualifications for, and that nobody seems to like. Everybody has different opinions on, but in general, they believe that they're like all powerful forces which can glue together people and places and the universe itself, and that nothing else could be more powerful than. And yet they still will literally fight wars over them. Um, and so for me, that was love and God. So for me, I was like, well, you know what? Like, I'm not, I'm not that religious in a classical sense, but I feel the most spiritually satisfied when I am feeling love, whether it's for a person or a thing or a setting or a game. And I think that love is an underused word because of all of the fear and baggage that we put around
I love that.
it.
What is your least favorite word?
S- um, probably like probably like young soul or old soul, if I can do a term, because people used to call me an old soul when I was a kid a lot, and I think it was always a way of dismissing me, and sort of saying like, "You're wise beyond your years. All right, that's great. Let's move on."
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
So, like, what's the rating level that we're going for on this video?
PG-13.
Just kidding, just kidding. But I think for me, I really like, um, I really like the idea that each person is their own world, almost their own like experience of the world, their own perspective. And so my way of putting it as like if you help one person, you help one world. And I love seeing people come into themselves more at a table or like laugh at a table. So I kind of I'm talking about like gaming and role playing games. So I think for me, what makes me like most excited to like kind of keep doing this, keep producing content, is when I see that it's making somebody laugh or cry or have fun, like experience an emotional release. And so for me, I would say what like inspires me creatively the most is feedback from external sources.
We are reaction junkies as GMs.
Mhm.
It's really true.
Great way of putting it.
I say this like um I know like from the kinks and cantrip side of things, like I know that people who often lead in those scenarios often view themselves in a similar way. And the flat circle Venn diagram between the kink D&D and LARP community is a
Mhm.
real thing. What turns you off? Almost got the spit take. Almost.
I would say what makes me the least excited to like continue creating a project, right? Um, is when I realize that well, I would say I'm not sure. Like what do you mean like what stops me from wanting to keep making a project, or what just makes me go like ick, I don't want to be involved in this?
Yeah, so you could say like what is like a creative turnoff? Like what makes you want to turn away from doing a project or makes you want to step away from a project altogether or not work with someone? You can take that
I think
anyway. It's intentionally vague.
I think like the biggest thing for me is a lack of respect for boundaries, and a lack of respect for time. And so for me, I think that, and also there's like, there are I'm not, people, she, her, me, 99% of the time. I don't really say like, oh, like, my pronouns, but you're not using them. Like, that's bad. But I don't like it when like somebody is like, oh, like, young women in game like don't understand my gaming or something like that. And it's like, well, maybe the space is a little exclusive. And so I think for me, what turns me off the most is from the sociological perspective that I have of like when somebody is saying it is the fault of like not of like only the agents and not the situation around them. And so I find that like, while I'm creating, it's ironic because I'm making this character guide and I'm saying, guys, please support my queer artistry and making these like characters that you can plop into your setting. But like you should and think about how they fit in your setting. Um, because for me, like I feel like the biggest thing is just or how they fit in the context of their family lives or the like their backstories is like because I wanted it to be fairly setting agnostic. So I came up with backstories where you could very easily say, like, okay, so this place being referenced is like village nondescript, or is this particular village or whatever. Um, but I just detest it when somebody says like this person is evil because they're an orc and orcs are evil, or when they say like this person this is about this specific person or character and not about the historical and contextual like societal context around them. And I think that as a world builder I always like to think about even the geographical context, like you were saying with your example of like what happens if we move this group that's not from the mountains high up in the mountains. Like, they're going to be different. So I think that sort of lack of awareness is what makes me get frustrated with people and projects the most.
What
Mhm.
sound or noise do you love?
What sound or noise do I love? I fall asleep to ASMR sometimes when I have a hard time sleeping. And a lot of what those ASMR videos I'll watch are like reading old books. So I actually really like the sounds of like paper crinkling and pages turning and like or just like people tapping and moving on like old parchment. So I think those are some of my favorite sounds, and like yeah, grew up around books.
What noise do you hate?
um, Shut up.
That phrase, just the stifling of
I
creativity.
I think yeah, and also the sort of like condescension that is usually embedded in it. Um, like I think that what I dislike the most is being like told like sort of like you're not worth listening to, right? That's what I hear when I hear that. So I dislike that. um I guess I also have a I don't know, I'm like nails on chalkboards, right? Like some classic stuff I dislike, but I'm not really a huge like I believe there's a term that I'm blanking on for is it misophonia? I don't struggle with specific noises hearing them. Although actually no, I don't like it when people chew on gum. Yeah, no, that is a thing.
Cool.
Hmm.
What profession other than the one that you are doing now would you most like to attempt?
Um I used to be a community organizer and I really liked it. But
That you've
I
never done before.
oh, that I've never done
Never
before?
done before. What
Oh,
would you
okay,
like
okay,
to
okay.
try?
Oh gosh.
Got to put you in a box. I have it. I have a note written here.
I'd
Put Zur in a box.
It's there in a box. I'm really bad at that. I'm really good at rambling my way out of boxes. I would love to be a traveling minstrel. I love to
I sort of
play.
feel like we are that though. Like we
We
pack up all our
we
bags,
are,
we
but
go to a
specifically
con.
with my violin and or jazz fiddle, as I prefer to call it, because that's most of what I play, and a sword. I would love to like travel around and sort of play for my dinner and meet people and get to know people in different places. Kind of like literally busk for my dinner, like play the jazz fiddle on the street to get money for my dinner or
Where
whatnot.
where do you want to go? Where would you go in
Um,
this current world?
in this current world, mostly the cities and the coasts of the US, and then also a few specific places like Germany, for example, in across the sea, which tend to also be very trans friendly and affirming spaces. I would definitely not like go to Florida, for example, um, given the choice.
Cool. What profession would be odious to you? What would you not like to do?
Politics. I have declined to go into politics before, and I've declined to go into politics, and I've declined to go into those sorts of figurehead positions, which are personally. I know some politicians. I've known some politicians who do good work, but also like it's not where I feel like I can have the strongest impact. I'd rather heal hearts and minds through my words and pages. And I think that it's important to fight for change on a political and a social organizational level. But that's not for me, at least not anymore. And I think it would be absolutely horrible to be under that level of scrutiny. The amount of scrutiny I'm already becoming like coming under. Like you asked me, you were like, the assumption of like, did Fiona, is that the name I chose? Is that my first name? It's like, it's not, because I like to have a bit of a safety net. I don't disclose my chosen name, my first name to people as much because I like to be harder to track back because I am becoming high public figure in this world, and I love that because I want to talk about non-binary issues, and I want to talk about I want to panel about consent in gaming. I want to do all these things, but ugh, they
People can get weird. People can get really, really weird sometimes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I've had enough negative experiences without that level of scrutiny that politics just sounds terrible to me.
I have to say, like, we have like a lot of similar roots. I spent my early 20s working in politics,
Mm,
and wow, what a dark time.
yeah.
Um, so speaking of dark times,
Mm.
if heaven exists, what would you like to hear St. Peter say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I'd like to hear something along the lines of, welcome. Everyone who you'd want to possibly encounter here is behind these gates where you'll be welcomed. However, all the people who you wouldn't want to possibly see are in their other heavens. They're elsewhere. You won't have to deal with them.
Wonderful.
That's pretty much it.
Breezy 3D artist has asked what your zodiac sign is.
I I'm a bad queer.
Aries.
Uh
Cool. Uh,
no, I know Aquarius.
oh,
I said I'm a bad queer.
oh,
I'm an Aquarius sun, and I don't remember the others. I'm
oh, I'm not
sorry.
that good of a lesbian either. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just know the
Mhm.
one.
Yeah, somebody
Um,
teach me how to be a better lesbian, please.
hello, hello. Lesbian Instagram accounts, please get at me. I need rising moon. I need to understand all of this. My straight ex girlfriend tried to teach me. I didn't pay attention. I have
Uh,
ADHD. So if you can find a way to like
same.
get me to focus, like put a video of something on above your forehead and then talk at
Mm,
me, it'll be great.
mhm,
But you
mhm.
gotta teach me. I can't care. Um,
The teaching the ADHD, there's a good, oh, please, I need to learn more, but my attention span is just so limited. Mm.
So, do you have any final thoughts before we call this a clean hour and a half?
Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Even if you are not looking to back Dungeons and Datemates, thanks for talking, and thank you, Molly, for the prompts because I like talking about queer stuff and trans stuff, and I think it's very rare to have a platform which wants me to talk, like wants to let me talk about my writing, but also specifically wants to have that angle and ask those questions. And so, just in general, if you're thinking about backing, I mean, please do. You support not only myself, but also our queer editor and our queer artist. And then additionally, these 12 characters are each super fantastic. I think I could have easily like done a Kickstarter for like just one of them and just like gone ham on one of them. You're gonna get 120 pages, and if you're still or so, and if you don't know what I mean by that, you're like, how could it be that long? And or you're like, oh, that's too long. I don't want 120 pages. Well, go ahead and check out the free sample on the Kickstarter page. You can get like an idea for what it's like, and really like you don't have to, it's like that buyer beware thing. Like you can check it out before you commit. You should always do that. Always use safety. But I personally really think that this project is unique for a few reasons, and those are the scale, the 12 different characters, the representation with the 4 non-binary characters, but also with we're trying to do a diverse representation of bodies and gender expressions across the cis characters as well. And then uh, every other project I've seen like it is like one character. And also the 5e, if you're into 5e, stat blocks that scale with your party so that they don't become irrelevant if your game is going on for a long time and your characters are leveling up, or you're like me and you like to hand out level ups like candy after every other game session because it lets you get to the fun stuff. Then these characters will be particularly useful for you, and it's also not that hard to backwards engineer how I'm making them. And I'm even happy to talk about that. Like I really love talking about game design. And so if anyone is interested in like how I made these characters, once you get your hands on the mechanics, you can always reach out. I'll probably do some other streams, or I'll definitely do some posts for backers of the actual making of it and looking more at the mechanics side as well. So I think the things which really make this project stand out are the 5 ECR scaling stat blocks that level up with your party, the scale, the 12 different characters, with the gender diversity, and also simply, it's fun. Each character is supposed to give you a bit of an emotional hurdle, but it's not supposed to be that much. And there will be an introduction for romance and safety. It's also going to be reviewed. I'm getting feedback from three con directors and another person I met yesterday on a panel about romance and relationships and sex in your games. And like, even just for the introduction alone, um, I think I'm going to be able to build better on what I wrote for Kings and Cantrips. I think I'm going to get feedback from people who've been gaming for longer than I've been alive, and I think that presenting those safety tools is something well worth like looking at. Um, and personally, I love to run silly games for my partners and my friends. And I love to not have to populate them with, you know, characters who like feel flat. I love to be able to be like, okay, I'm gonna dig really deep. And so if you like to dig really deep in a character, or you just are going to say eventually, like, I could invent a random character off the fly, or I could pull out one of these dozen. It's great. It's just always good to have backup material on hand. Um, but especially if you like romance, I hope that you will check it out.
Cool. And
Um,
if we want to reach you on the interwebs, you are on Instagram, Fiona Shade Stories. Where else are you?
So I'm on Instagram and Discord as Fiona Shade Stories. The main way that I communicate with my community that I'm trying to grow is through my Discord community. I used to stream on Twitch. I will be starting to stream occasionally again, but also I'm joining a group. I can't announce it yet because they're going to announce it of a bunch of other Twitch partners and affiliates, and so I'll be running D&D for them. So if you want, follow my Discord or follow me on Kickstarter, because those are the two places that I post most at this point. And also in our Discord, we do, most days, we do a role-playing game question of the day. So it's some sort of prompt, and we do an indie TTRPG club. So this coming Wednesday, in a couple of days, I'm going to be playing in the Discord server, not recorded for stream, the Zone RPG, which is just a little horror game with a few online friends, and anyone is welcome to join and either play or watch. So again, those are my things. Catch me on Discord, Fiona Shade Stories. Please catch me on Insta, Fiona Shade Stories, because my Insta is baby and needs help growing, as I am a new creator. And even if you just follow me on Kickstarter or Drive Through RPG, you can find my stuff on Drive Through RPG, but you can also add it as add-ons to if you as add-ons or higher reward tiers on the current Kickstarter. You can find my previous Kickstarter stuff as well: the Teacup Dragon, gorgeous little companion, 3 Magic Monk subclasses, etc.
Awesome.
Um, mhm. Thank you
Love it.
so much, Molly. Um,
My pleasure.
yeah,
I've been Molly. You can find me at www.mollyhitsdifferent.com.
nice.
I also, please make sure, if you are not already following us on this here, the Twitchers, make
Hmm.
sure that you are following. If you have it in you to throw us a sub, we love you very much. Check us out over on Patreon. You can also follow my show, The Concord and Illuminati. We are in production on our third,
Ooh,
fourth season on YouTube,
ooh,
so you'll see it over there. That's a show focused on showcasing third party content in a 5e system. So we
ooh.
are always working on that, and
Mm.
we're hoping to. We're evaluating moving to Tales of the Valiant. We're trying to see what might happen there.
Well, let me know if you need
Um,
any extra content for that.
Always.
Or if you ever want
Um,
to guest.
but yes, I will be unrelenting in your DMs. I promise.
Please do.
Um,
I've loved talking with you. And guys, if you're here for me and you haven't followed, please hit the follow button. All on the table RPG interviews. Lots of other people like me, as well as plays D&D. So if you are here, go ahead and mash that follow button for me, please.
and get over onto Fiona's socials. We have listed them all in the chat over the past little bit. Follow them on Discord. Follow
Is
Zero
there?
Zero on Discord. and we are going to have so much fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
I think
I think
that's
we're
it.
done.
I think we're done,
Are you
but,
feeling done?
thank y'all. If you have any other questions that didn't get answered and you wanna talk to me about sensitivity reading or queer characters or identities, hit me up. Y'all know
You can
Molly's
also
amazing.
slide into the comments. We'll
Mhm,
respond in the
mhm.
comments on because this will eventually make its way over to another video
To the
hosting platform.
YouTubes. Mm.
You said the word. You said the word. Oh no, they're gonna cut the stream. They're gonna turn it off.